a plant that can feed entire villages with zero fertilizer, endure droughts that kill wheat, and churn out 400 pounds from a single stem. Yet for centuries it was turned into a weapon. How did knowledge of its hidden poison become the master's tool of control, and even now leave over 1 billion people with the stigma of being called slave food? The answer begins long before European ships ever crossed the Atlantic. Deep in the forests of the southwestern Amazon, long before wheat or rice were ever sown, indigenous communities began domesticating a plant both promising and dangerous. Cassava, a root that would one day feed continents, was first tamed thousands of years ago, at least 4 to 5 millennia ago, and likely earlier in the early to mid-Holocene. Archaeobotanical traces, starch grains on ancient stone tools, and dark earths shaped by human hands reveal a relationship stretching back into prehistory. From the beginning, cassava demanded respect. Its roots, heavy with hidden cyanide, could nourish or kill. The solution was never simple. Over generations, indigenous peoples engineered a sophisticated system for detoxification, peeling, grating, pressing, soaking, fermenting, and roasting. This was not casual kitchen work. It was a biochemical choreography, refined through trial, error, and survival. Each step stripped away a layer of poison and transformed a lethal root into safe food. Ethnographers record these techniques as local, varied, and deeply embedded in community life, with every region developing its own tools and rituals. At the heart of this technology stood women. Across the Amazon and beyond, women selected the right varieties, knew when a root was ready, orchestrated the long hours of grating and pressing, and judged by smell and texture when the mash was finally safe. Processing cassava was more than a daily task. It was a sacred trust, a skill passed from mother to daughter, often through song, story, and careful hands. In some communities, girls learned the art as part of coming of age, their first lessons tied to the safety of the entire household. This knowledge did not live in books. It was embodied, practical, and carefully guarded. A grandmother's advice on how long to soak, the rhythm of a work song, keeping hands moving in unison, the warning never to eat before roasting. These were the protocols that kept families alive. For millennia, indigenous women ensured that cassava, the plant that could kill, became the plant that sustained. By the time foreign ships arrived, the science of survival was already woven into the daily lives of countless villages, invisible to outsiders, yet essential for life in the tropics. Cassava's living pantry rewrites the rules of survival. Unlike grains that demand careful timing and storage, cassava roots can stay buried for months or even years, turning the soil itself into a place to keep food. In some traditional systems, families harvest only what they need, leaving the rest in the ground, safe from rot, rodents, and thieves. Staying in the ground can last a year or more, a simple insurance against drought or disaster when other crops fail. The plant's resilience is unmatched among staples. Cassava shrugs off heat that wilts maize or wheat, thriving in temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Its deep taproots reach water when the surface is bone dry, so irrigation is unnecessary once the crop is established. Where soils are acidic, sandy, or stripped of nutrients, cassava still produces. Fertilizer and pesticides are optional, not essential. Even after seasons of neglect, a single cutting pushed into poor earth can yield a cluster of roots heavy with calories. The numbers are staggering. Under good conditions, a field can produce 30,000 to 45,000 pounds of roots per acre, several times the yield of wheat or rice. 1 acre, managed well, supplies enough calories to feed 20 people for a year. In backyard gardens or wide-spaced plots, Individual plants sometimes reach astonishing sizes, with roots weighing dozens of pounds. While those giants are rare, the plant's baseline productivity is extraordinary. Propagation is simple. No seeds, just cuttings from mature stems, each one ready to become another food bank in the soil. For communities facing unpredictable rain, poor soils, or sudden hunger, cassava offers a quiet kind of security. It grows where others fail, waits patiently in the earth, and needs little beyond an initial planting. This biological edge is not just a curiosity. It is the reason the crop became so attractive to anyone seeking cheap, reliable calories. Before colonial powers ever saw its potential for control, cassava's natural traits had already made it the ultimate survivor. By the mid-1500s, Portuguese colonizers recognized a strategic advantage in a root that could thrive where other crops failed. Cassava's journey from Brazil to West Africa was not just about calories, it was about control. Ship manifests from the Atlantic slave trade list barrels of farinha de mandioca and cassava bread, loaded in Luanda and Bahia, destined for slave forts and the holds of slave ships. Cassava's promise came with a threat embedded in its chemistry. Bitter varieties could contain up to 400 milligrams of cyanide per kilogram of fresh root. The lethal threshold for a human can be as low as 50 to 60 milligrams. This was not an abstract danger, it was poison in plain sight. The process to make cassava safe was neither quick nor simple. Grading, soaking, pressing, fermenting, each stage was essential, and each step could be a matter of life and death. Traditional detoxification took 5 to 7 days, stripping away over 90% of the poison, but only if every stage was done correctly. That traditional knowledge was the difference between food and fatality. On plantations, the tools for that process were expensive and often kept in central processing houses. Iron-studded graters, heavy presses, roasting pans. These implements were guarded. Overseers or trusted kitchen workers held the keys. For the majority of enslaved laborers, access to equipment and instruction was tightly regulated. Plantation records from Bahia and mission reports from Angola describe workers issued rations of cassava flour, while the full method of safe processing remained concentrated in the hands of a select few. Estate manuals explicitly warned against teaching outsiders the full method. The risk was not theoretical. Chronic exposure to sublethal cyanide led to outbreaks of neurological disease. Konzo, a sudden and irreversible paralysis, appeared in communities forced to rely on poorly processed cassava. Medical records from later centuries document paralysis, ataxia, and unexplained deaths traced back to a food that, without proper knowledge, could turn lethal in a single meal. In this system, food became a lever of power. Survival depended not just on land or labor, but on access to the guarded steps and guarded tools that turned poison into bread. The root that could feed a plantation was also the root that could kill it from within. For the enslaved, every meal was a reminder that life depended on the master's kitchen and on the knowledge kept behind locked doors, a daily lesson in control and survival. Cassava's story did not end with emancipation. Across the Americas and Africa, the label slave food clung long after the chains were broken. For generations, cassava was branded as poor people's fare, a mark of hardship, a reminder of a past that elites wanted to leave behind. In cities from Salvador to Lagos, wheat bread and imported rice became status symbols, while cassava dishes were pushed to the margins and dismissed as backward or desperate. This was not just social snobbery, it was policy. Colonial governments and later development agencies steered research and funding toward grains like wheat and maize, crops that fit the model of industrial agriculture. Cassava had a short shelf life. Roots spoiled within 2 days of harvest. It refused to conform to seed sales or large-scale mechanization, so it was left behind. The numbers tell the story. Even as the global tapioca trade grew to over $2 billion a year, research budgets for cassava hovered at a fraction of what was spent on wheat or rice. In some years, less than 1%. Meanwhile, more than 1 billion people depended on cassava as their main source of calories, especially in the world's poorest regions. The economic structure was clear. Value flowed not to the farmers who grew the roots, but to the processors and exporters who turned them into flour, starch, and snacks for distant markets. For smallholders, the crop that could feed a village rarely lifted families out of poverty. But the story did not stop at suppression. In rural Africa, women formed cooperatives to pool harvests, share equipment, and negotiate better prices for products like gari and fufu. These groups built new economic power from an old crop, turning collective action into income and local leadership. Scientists at the FAO and international research centers began to recognize cassava's unmatched resilience. They published reports calling it a cornerstone for food security in a hotter, drier world. The same root once used to control and stigmatize has become a symbol of resistance and renewal. In kitchens, markets, and festivals, cassava is reimagined, not as a relic of poverty, but as a tool of survival and a badge of pride. Cassava now feeds 1 billion people, yet its stigma endures by colonial design. As climate extremes threaten global staples, Earth's most resilient crop is still dismissed as poverty food. The true poison is not in the root. It is in the story we choose to keep telling. What story will you believe?